welcome or welcome back to BookTube with Amy. So last week in my wrap up I spoke about the fact that I wasn't going to review Netgalleys on the channel going forward anymore, so I just thought that I would do a single wrap up to chat about all the Netgalleys I read while I was on hiatus. So the first Netgalley that I read, I actually really did enjoy. This is one that I was anticipating and requested it and was so delighted to be approved, and that is The Devil Makes Three by Tori Bovolino. And this is on sale now, so you know you're not getting the scoop, unfortunately. Mummy needed a break. So it was such a great book. It is set in a university, and we have the librarian assistant Tess, and she does not have a very good relationship with the headmaster and plays a little bit of a prank. It turns out that in fact it's not the headmaster, it's the headmaster's son, and they form an unlikely friendship. They accidentally release a demon and the demon is trying to take over their body. Standard uni stuff, you know. Freshers week, everybody knows. So this is a really great read for me. I blitzed through it. It was really fast paced. I'm not going to give away any spoilers. It's something I'm trying to get better at as a person, because I do just spoil near enough every book that I review, so I'm trying not to. But it was really great. It was everything that I need from a horror book. There were times where it was very creepy and the tension was there, but then it was also really comical at points and a wee bit funny and cheesy, which I love. It was just a really great book. The character of Tess is written so well. I love the chapters that you were getting from her perspective. She has so much detail in her character. The way that it's written is so detailed that like when a situation happens you can almost think what she's thinking before you read it on the page, and that's something that stuck with me after I finished reading this book, is just being able to like know how she would feel or think about a certain situation, and that only happens to me every so often with books, so I really did enjoy that about this one. And then Elliot, who's our male counterpart, he is really interesting. He has this tragic backstory that you find a lot about, and he is very endearing and you find yourself really rooting for him, or I find myself really rooting for him. And which was interesting in this book is that you actually get some of the story from the demon's perspective as well that they release, which is something I've never seen done in a novel, and it just added an extra element of intrigue to it for me. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. I rated this one a 5-star. I thought it was phenomenal. If you like sort of a Grady Hendrix's style of horror where it is that campy, funny, but like also quite gruesome in parts, then I think that you'll really enjoy this one. Next up I read My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This probably isn't a book that I would have requested. I haven't read another Stephen Graham Jones novel, but I know that he is quite prolific and I know that people really enjoy his works. The premise of this story didn't hugely appeal to me, but I requested it again because, like I had spoke about in my previous video, I just felt like I needed a Netgalley to chat about, so I requested it and I read it, even though it probably wasn't for me, which is my bad. Basic premise is we have our main character Jade, and she is half Indian, she's an outcast, she has a dead mum and an abusive alcoholic dad, and she is a humongous horror geek, and she lives in a small town and some creepy spooky stuff starts happening in her small town, and she basically predicts how it's going to go down. She's trying to solve, you know, whether this is a real serial killer, and she's using all her horror movie knowledge to figure it out. That to me just doesn't sound very interesting. Personally, it sounds a wee bit been there done that, but I decided to give it a go. So I requested it, I read it, and I just didn't really love this one. It didn't nail it for me. I feel like Jade, with everything that she has going on in her life, she doesn't really feel like there's anywhere that's safe or anywhere that's particularly comfortable or home-like to her, and that could have created a really interesting character dynamic. But for me, that just fell a bit flat. I didn't find that with Jade. I just felt like she was sort of a bit dull as a character, really. I feel like the dialogue was extremely frustrating to me as a reader. There would be times in the book where somebody would have a conversation with her and they would ask a direct question, or they'd be talking about a particular subject, and she'd almost just go off in her own wee diatribe and say whatever it was that she wanted to say, and it would always revolve around like really obscure, weird horror reference. And while I do appreciate that, because we know that I am a humongous horror movie fan, and so I did like a lot of the trivia and a lot of the dialogue that she had in it revolving around the horror movies, it just didn't really fit with the plot. Like, when stuff starts happening, it makes a wee bit more sense, but right in the beginning of the book, it's like she's living in her own wee world, and that made it hard for me to connect with her. And I don't know if that was deliberate, to point out how much of an outcast she is, that no even you as a reader can connect to her. But I just feel like that's a wee bit of a miss, because if she's that much of an outcast, then we as the reader, I feel like, should be really rooting for her, and really getting on board with her. And it just didn't happen for me. I feel like she just had whatever she wanted to say, and she was going to say it regardless of what the other person in the conversation was actually saying, and it just made her really unlikable for me, and I got really frustrated at certain points of her dialogue. Now, about halfway through this book, it's not a long novel, it is quite a short novel, and about halfway through I was just like, I don't know, like, if I'm going to be able to finish this. I just feel like there was so much build up, and like, I don't like that in a horror novel. Like, I feel like the tension should certainly build and the tension should be there, but then like something should be happening other than just building tension, and there just really wasn't. It was very much like a lot of build up, and I was just getting really concerned that the ending wasn't going to pay off the build up. So I had looked at a couple of reviews and I spoiled the book for myself, but that's fine, I like a spoiler. So I had read some reviews on Goodreads, I had watched a couple of videos, and everybody was seeming to really love it. So I was like, great, okay, I'll persevere, and I finished it. And personally for me, I didn't feel like the ending warranted the build up. I think that it was quite predictable and nothing out of the ordinary. It certainly wasn't earth-shattering, and it didn't really bring anything new to the plate in my eyes. So this just was a bit of a miss for me. I rated it a 1 star. I just couldn't get on board with the writing style or the characters, and there was basically no plot until like the last few chapters of the book, so just wasn't great for me. Then next up is another book that just wasn't really for me, and that was The Shadow People by Graham Masterton. So the only real reason that I requested this was because it was Graham Masterton, and I've reviewed another Graham Masterton book on the channel before, and I did enjoy the reading experience. I didn't feel like the ending was all that great, but I thought, you know what, we'll give the dude another go, we'll see what the script is. So requested this one, got approved for it, and I didn't even get to the 100-page mark before I DNF'd this book. So the premise is, it's a bit of a police procedural. We're following 2 detectives and they are trying to hunt down a cult of cannibals, and like, on paper, cult of cannibals is me out of the back. Like, that sounds just so far up my street. But the fact that it was told through 2 police officers' perspectives really isn't, because I check out during a police procedural. Like, it is just no my cup of tea when it's in books or films or TV shows. Like, I don't enjoy it. So again, on paper, like, I probably shouldn't have requested this one. I don't think that I am the target audience, but I did, and so here we are. This could have been so amazing. I will say, the scenes that I read where the cannibal cult were actually being a cannibal cult were gruesome and detailed and really well written. There's a particular scene in it quite early on in the beginning where I was actually like, what? Like, that's give me the dry book. Like, that is gruesome, and it was great. And I think that if the book was just more like that, then it could have been fantastic. What I didn't really like was the social commentary in this book around gender identity, and I felt like every character in this book was just a stereotype. Now, maybe somebody in the comments will be a smart arse and tell me that later on in the book it is all revealed as to why, or you know, some, I don't know, justified genius reason is why Graham Masterton writes all his characters as a stereotype. Like, great for you if you enjoyed it, fine, but for me, I just found it really quite offensive, and like he had put absolutely no thought into his characters whatsoever other than their race and played off of that. So I was getting really angry reading this book at certain points. So one of the things that really got me for the beginning was just the casual transphobia. So one of the people that they arrest really early on in the book is a suspected cult member. I didn't read the book enough to know whether it was confirmed or not, but when the police arrested them, they were suspected, and they are arrested in a W.H. Smith. And the manager of the W.H. Smith is referring to the person that they have arrested as she. And the police officer whose perspective we are reading, who I believe is one of the main police officers on the case, he keeps referring, well, he's confused as to why the manager is referring to the suspect as she. Alright, now when we meet this suspect, they are presenting as female, they are wearing a dress, hence the use of the term she. And the detective is referring to him constantly as the man in the dress, which I just found offensive. And then not only was he referring him to the man in a dress, they keep making comments about how back in the day they could call him Little Miss Muffet, and they could say this and they could say that and they could do this and they could do that, and it was just like a wholly offensive diatribe of things that they could do back in the day but would be frowned upon now because we're so woke. Like, and that annoys me. Like, just because we have progressed as a society and because we are considerate enough to care about how other people want to identify, and we accept that everybody can be whomever they choose to be and live their lives however they choose to live, doesn't mean that we are woke and somehow inferior. Like, that just annoys me when people use that. Like, didn't try and downplay the fact that I am a far more compassionate and loving human than you will ever be. Like, fuck off. So anyway, I felt like it was unnecessary. And then what pissed me off even more is that at the end of this detective's entire diatribe about how he's upset about the fact that he can't be transphobic outwardly because of society being too woke, he then goes, oh, but I am the transphobic because I've got a neighbour who's trans that I quite like. Like, which is just the equivalent to I'm no racist because I've got a black pal, which like just fucks me off. So that was really frustrating to me, and I was like, right, okay, like, we'll keep going. Like, maybe I'm taking it the wrong way, and you know, like, this officer is going to be like this, and then like there's going to be like an education piece or whatever, and one of the other officers is going to be like, well, you can't do that, blah blah blah, and it'll open his mind a wee bit, and like it's going to be an educational tool, because fine, right, I would get that. But no, it wasn't used as an education piece. What happens is when they take the suspect back to the station, they decide that they aren't happy with their smell because they haven't had a wash in a wee while, which you would imagine if they've been part of a cannibal cult. I don't think that showering is on the top list of their priorities, but whatever. So they take this poor person outside, strip them naked and hose them down. Like, as if that is a normal thing to do, and then don't put them back into their own clothing that they obviously feel comfortable in, and just give them like generic boy clothing, which is just inappropriate. So I was like, no, absolutely not. And then every character is just a complete stereotype. Women characters in this book you don't really get anything from. I didn't find out anything about any of the female characters other than how attractive they were or how unattractive they were, and how likely our main detective was to fuck them. the black coppers were using blood and in it, like, you know, that's the only words that black people can say. There was an Asian character who were introduced to who's a doctor, who is called Dr. Basmati. No was pretty much my point. No. I just feel like there was no thought put into any of the characters whatsoever. It just felt really flat for me. I think that the social commentary that was running through it while I read it was just no for me whatsoever. Terrible book. Don't recommend anybody buys it. Don't recommend anybody reads it. I'll never read another Graham Masterton book again. Like, it's properly put me off, because I just can't support somebody who's just as casually transphobic and microaggressively racist within his books. So really disappointing, and I'll never purchase another Graham Masterton again, or review another Graham Masterton on the channel. Like, you're done, cancelled. So I found that really disappointing. But then what I found even more disappointing was on Goodreads. After this had came out, I decided to have a wee nosy to see if I was the only person who had picked up on all these different points, and there was only like maybe one other review on there that had mentioned the transphobia. Everybody else had rated it 4 or 5 stars, made comments like, oh, he's the master of horror, and like, it's so brilliantly gruesome. And it's like, right, so like, I get that, like the bits that I read that were gruesome were written well, but are we celebrating the fact that he can write a gruesome scene so much so that we're overlooking the fact that he has just like been transphobic to an entire community of people? Like, where are our priorities, guys? I also read from Netgalley Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Caw, and this is one that I was genuinely excited about. It's been on my wish list for a good wee while to pre-order, so when I got it in Netgalley I was absolutely buzzing. So there is a mansion that a group of friends have booked out to host a wedding in, and in this mansion it's supposed to be notoriously haunted, and it's supposed to be built on top of the bones of a bride who went missing on her wedding day. And you know, things start to go a wee bit spooky when the wedding party arrives. I've seen loads of people talk about it on Horror BookTube, about how this was on their anticipated releases list, and it just looked brilliant. So I was so pleased when I managed to get it on Netgalley, but it just didn't live up to the hype. I was a wee bit disappointed. I feel like all of the characters in this are fairly forgettable. There is some drama between the group of friends. They are all friendly, having a good time, and that is laid out right for the beginning. So I was like, great, getting the goss for the get-go. Like, I love to be in the know, phenomenal. But then the rifts and drama that happens doesn't really go anywhere, so it's a wee bit pointless to the main plot of the story. And this is a really short novel, and for like the first 3/4 of the book, nothing spooky happens really, other than maybe one sighting of a ghost. But other than that, it is these friends just like spilling the tea and having a bit of booze and food and wedding prep, which just wasn't particularly fun to read. And then it just goes mental really quickly, like so quickly that it doesn't make sense for it to have actually happened like that. Like, the plot goes from nothing to 100 so quickly that what actually happens just seems so unbelievable. And I don't like that in my supernatural horror. I like when it seems like it's something that could happen to me. That creeps me out more. Like, I want to be there and imagine myself in that situation and, you know, be thinking about wee mad ghosts coming to kill me. Like, that's why I read it. But it just all happens so quickly and so manically that it doesn't seem real, and it really put me off. The build up to it was just a bit of a slog, and then it didn't pay off at the end for me personally. So yes, I was really disappointed in this one. I ended up rating it a 1 star. The characters were terrible. They were all terrible, terrible people, and they were all terrible friends, and I did not care who lived or died or who got munched by a ghost. They were all so selfish, even at the end, and like, it was just mad. I think that they tried to do some like mental health rep in this also, and it just didn't really work for me, like, because it was basically just a plot device for when things started going mental. People were like, oh, is she having a funny turn, or is she really seeing ghosts? Like, I just feel like that's been so done to the death. Like, we do need to be using mental health to further a plot anymore, like that. So I didn't love it, but it's fine. Anyway, that was the last of the Netgalleys, and like I say, I'm not going to review any more Netgalleys on the channel unless it is a new release that I am genuinely excited about, but I have so many physical books that I need to get through that I do need to be reading tiny wee books on my phone. So I hope that you are enjoying whatever it is that you're reading just now, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.